Hey everybody, I'm going to do my best to give you a quick spoiler-free setup and kick off the tutorial for Etherfields, how to play, because there's a lot of questions and it's really hard to make any of this spoiler-free, but I'll do what I can. There will be some minor spoilers, nothing that you're not going to see within the first few minutes of getting the game out and putting it on the table yourself, but apart from that, I will keep everything as vague as I possibly can and use things to cover up pictures and tiles and anything else so that you don't get any look at anything that could be considered a spoiler. Alright, let's jump into it. Set up straight away. Put the board out, and for the first time campaign you'll also want to pick your character. I've just grabbed the tough guy out. Grab his deck of influence cards, put it off to his left, and get yourself an actions card as well. You'll need a little bit of space to the right hand side of the board for your discard pile, and underneath your board here for your progress cards that we'll see come out as you play. Back onto the main board, you'll take, there's 12 turn cards. They'll sit on that location there. You'll get the 6 floor cards and the 6 fate cards. That deck will get bigger as you progress the game, but that's where they go over there. They can be shuffled up and placed there. And you're ready to begin. Okay, the game instructs you to get out the 101X gate, and that tells you how to set up. So take all the 101 secret tiles and cards and reveal the setup tile. You don't have any masks or items yet. Your turn deck is 12. Okay, we have the cards and the tiles for the starting scenario, the introductory scenario. We take the 1 setup tile, as it says on the rules, and place it, flip it over. It has the location A2. We find A2 on the board and line it up there. Note, if it said something like B2 and B2 was written down here, you would slide it so that the lettering covers up where it's written on the board. So if it was B2 down here, it would be covering this B2, and it would straddle multiple spaces across the board. That is normal and that will happen. But in this instance, A2 up the top here covers up where A2 is written on the board, sits up there. This little blue spot is where you can put your starting characters. It straddles 2 quadrants. You can pick which one you want to start in. We'll just start here. And that's how we set up the first dream. Okay, once your character is on the board, just come down back to your setup tile. It'll tell you the turn deck. It's got the number 12 on that one, so you take all 12 cards, give it a shuffle, and place it face up here. As you take your turns, on completion of the player turns, you'll then go through the actions on here and then flip this card over into the discard pile. When this deck runs out, it's finished. A lot of dreams don't take 12 turns, they'll take a lot less. So in that case, if for example a dream only took 3, you would just take 3 cards face up here and leave the rest there. And as you discard them, they just go back in there. Okay, we're going to go through a very basic turn here. I'm going to show you how to move and do one of the actions on the board. I'm going to move 2 spaces because I want to come down to this spot and try to assault this red altar. So I'm 2 spaces away. You can only move orthogonally unless you've got an ability. I've got nothing. So that's 2 spaces away. To move the 2 spaces, I'm going to discard this card here. It's got 2 cunning on it, which is the yellow. So I lose the 1 red wrath. It just goes in my discard pile, face up there, and I got the 2 cunning that I needed to make that movement. Now to do the assault, it's going to cost 6. That red symbol with the line through it just to its left means that you can only do it once, and then that action is blocked. That's okay. Now what have we got left? I've got at the top here, they've all got 1, 1, and 1. So I've only got 3. Now I've got a couple of options here. If you look at the text down here, I've got an anytime action with a little lightning bolt. It costs me nothing. I can seal this card and get one of 3 awareness, cunning, or wrath. I want the 3 wrath. But if I did that, I would flip the card over here. It's now face down. It's not in my discard pile. And then I'd still only have 2 more, which gets me to 5, not the 6 I needed. But I am going to do that to show you one more action. So I'm at 5 at the moment. And I'm going to roll the luck die. This is the luck die. It's got a number of different sides. It's got 2 blanks that don't add anything. It's got 1 X that if you fail, you take a wound and the entire action fails altogether. And then there's a extra 1, 2, or 3 pip. And that'll add extra. So I've got a 50-50 chance of adding at least 1 or more wrath to this action. To do this dice, I need to have spent at least 1 influence. So far I've spent 5. I just need that 1 more. So I'll roll the dice and see how we go. Oh, that is very unfortunate. So I've taken a wound, but if you look at your influence deck, your starting deck has special abilities on the back of it. Now my tough guy here has the ability, it costs me 2 wrath. If I spend 2 wrath and I suffer a wound during the dreamscape phase, I can discard this card, so it just goes in my discard pile to prevent the 1 wound. Unfortunately, I've already spent all my wrath because I failed that thing, so I still get that wound, but that is something. That card has to be on top for you to do that action. If it's not there, and it won't be there as you start to fatten out your deck with influence cards from the market, you won't be able to do it, but if the card is on top, you have that option. Now just looking at the board again, up here, there's an option here that requires 3 cunning times the number of players. Fairly straightforward. If you've got 2 characters going, that action would cost 6. That being said, it's 2 lots of 3. You can spend 6 in one go to perform that action, or if you've only got 3 cunning, you can perform that action with the 3 and then put a cunning token up here. That means that another player or yourself at another turn can come along, spend the other 3, and then you can perform that action. Another thing players can do with their card is place progress cards. Now, they'll say progress up the top here. There's cunning progress, there's wrath, and there's awareness progress cards. They've all got a progress up the top. They all cost a different amount to place. In this particular instance, this one costs 4 wrath to place this card. So if I want to place this card, instead of taking my other turn, I've got 1, 2, 3 at the moment. I'll spend those and I will roll the luck die to try to place this progress card. Roll the dice, and I got the one I needed. So this card now slots in underneath your board here, and you've got this ability. Now again, the cost is there, and it's got the description of the bonus that you get down the bottom here. And there are all sorts of cards both in your starting deck and in the influence deck as you start to fatten out. We'll see how that goes later. It's also worth noting some of these progress cards are just a straight bonus that stay there as long as you've got that card. Other ones will tell you to flip a card once you've performed the bonus on there. If you flip the card, it stays in your progress area underneath the board, but it's flipped upside down. There are actions you can do later on that specifically say to unflip cards. Now, unflipping cards is not the same as unsealing cards. The sealed cards that we saw before, when we spent this particular card, we sealed it before to get 3 wrath. That one is sealed. There is a different action to unseal that. If you unseal that card, it's flipped back up into your discard pile. It doesn't go in your hand or back on the top of your deck. It's just the discard pile. Unflipped cards, if you unflip a progress card, it still stays underneath. Item cards, what we'll talk about next. I'm not going to flip these up to show you what they are, but there are 3 slots on the board for item cards. This is where they go. You can only hold 3 at the moment. There is space for a 4th one, but that needs to get unlocked. And up here on the board is the storage area. You may have a lot of items, but you can only ever hold 3. The rest of them live in the storage. If you're ever told to discard an item after using it, which a lot of them will, it doesn't go back in the box. It goes in your storage area. at the start of a game or when you're resetting, you shuffle your items in the storage area and you place them back down here. You don't know what you're going to get. You don't get to choose what you're going to get. If the item tells you that after use, or if an event tells you after use to put the item back in the item market, it does not go in your storage. It goes back in the box at the back, and all of those decks get reshuffled when you do a reset. We're going to quickly touch on the clock. It's here. It has a varying starting number depending on the number of players, and you'll discover that soon enough. But essentially what it means is you can spend at any time 1 hour to give one of your characters one movement, or you can spend an hour or two or however many to add additional turn cards back into your deck before you run out. Now you would most likely think, well, why would I want just a bit of movement instead of getting whole turns? Trust me, there will be times when you need movement and you do not want the turn card to actually trigger. Let's talk entities. Now, you'll see down the bottom here on this entity card, nice and covered, you'll have 3 different symbols: morphing, basic action, and special effect. Once all of the players have passed or finished their turn, you resolve the turn card. In this instance, you would do a basic effect, then roll for movement, then do the special effect, and then discard the card. Up the top of the card here, and it'll be on all of the different entity cards, it'll have their basic movement. In this instance, it's 4. That changes. When you roll the movement dice, if they roll the arrow with the little lines, they roll their base movement on that card. If they roll this one, they just get a single movement. And if they roll this one, they get their full movement on the card and get to roll the dice a second time. Same as characters, they get to move orthogonally. They can't move diagonally. They always move towards the nearest character unless there's a rule that says otherwise. And if they're on a character, they will stop. A lot of the turn cards have this morphing effect, and a lot of the entity cards will tell you when you resolve a morphing effect, you add a morphing token. Morphing tokens are these red background ones. You randomize them, you pick one, flip it face up, and it'll have a variety of different bad things that enhance the entity that you're facing off against. Some of them, like this one up here, will let them do an additional wound, or this one will seal an additional 2 cards. It's always an additional to what they do currently. That means that if they then do, for example, a basic effect, the basic effect inflicts a wound, they would inflict, if they had one of these tokens, an additional wound. If they had this token instead, they would not wound and seal some cards. The +2 seal, if they would normally seal some cards, they seal an additional 2. Likewise with the wound, if they were going to wound you, the wound would inflict an additional wound than normal. Anything that requires range, it would be an additional 1 range, movement, etc., etc. That's how the morphings work. So on completion of the tutorial dream, you enter the world map. There's a little bit of setup for doing all of that, and I'm going to go through it as best I can. There will be some minor spoilers. If you don't want to see anything, you may as well stop it now. But I don't think I'm giving anything really important away, and there are some important concepts you will need to get your head around that'll make this easy to move forward. But if you don't want to watch, turn off now. Otherwise, you will have created a slumber deck, the red cards, with a green card at the bottom there. You'll also have a slumber map tile deck. There'll be 4 cards, 2 of the cards say starting on it, like that one up the top. There'll also be a couple of world maps that come out. Here's just one of them. I won't spoil it, I won't show you both of them, but I will have to show you at least the actions to see how the world works. But first things first, you come out of a dream, you automatically set up your slumber map. You take the 2 starting cards and you flip them up onto the map up here. I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to reveal what they look like. I'm going as spoiler free as I can. But you would set them up there, flip them over. there'll be a starting location for your characters. You put the characters on the board and they stay there. You come to the world map. You take the group token, you put it on the awakening symbol up here, and now you need to start moving around the world map and resolving locations to get keys to move on to new dreams. So from the awakening, the movement up here is free. You just follow the arrows. We can go here if we like. You've got a question mark followed by an exclamation mark. The question mark means you always do them in turn order. The question mark is resolving a fate card. The question mark here, I'm not going to resolve them for you now so you don't see. Then you would resolve the question mark. The question mark is the slumber deck. They are the encounters. Some of them will just instruct you to maybe do something if you've got the right setup. Others will have an actual entity on them. If you draw an entity, again, I'm not going to spoil it, but if you do draw an entity, that's when you go onto your slumber map that you've already set up with your characters and you resolve that event. That monster would potentially sit here, face up, but I'm not going to reveal anything. Once you've completed that entity, and I will tell you on the card how to do so, you leave your characters on that map. You don't take them off that map. You don't reset them. They stay where they are. Your hands don't get discarded. You keep the cards in your hand. All of that stays the same. You keep the wounds and everything else. You come back to the world map. Once you've resolved the rest of that location, you keep moving around. You follow the arrows. Where do you want to go? Go down here. You would resolve another slumber. Go down here to resolve a fate card. Come down here and you get that key. And then a fate card and then another slumber card. Move around some more and eventually you'll get to this portal. Now you've only got one key at the moment. You will have drawn a couple of new gates at the end of the tutorial. Those gates will tell you the number of keys required to enter a dream and the district you need to be in. This district is Suburbia. You'll find one of your dreams requires 2 keys and is in Suburbia. So once you've got the 2 keys, and that might require going around and doing it twice to get the second key, come back to this portal, enter the dream, and follow the setup on the new dream gate. That's how the world map works. In between that, you'll be jumping to a lot of slumbers and resolving those. Now, a lot of the fate cards have instructions that will tell you to draw additional slumber map tiles. The Dreamscape slumber tiles, they're called. So in that case, you would draw an additional one and put it on the board. They might also ask you if there's a free quirk slot on the Dreamscape to place that card there. Now what that looks like, I'll try to be as spoiler-free as I can, but it looks very straightforward like that. You would place the card on top of there. If there is no quirk slot, then the fate card simply gets discarded at the bottom of the deck. Nice and easy. Once you finish any slumber, you do not take any of those other cards away, those other map tiles away. It stays up there until you enter a new dream. So that map will progressively get bigger right up until you enter your new dream. Once you do enter that dream, all your fate cards that are on the slumber map go to the bottom of the fate deck. All of the other slumber map cards get put back in the pile with the starting ones on top, ready to reset for when you complete your dream and come back onto the world map. And when you come back onto the world map, you just draw those 2 starting tiles again face up and start all over again. Alright, last things now, just a few minor bits and pieces that are worth noting. Reshuffle. When your deck over here, when it is finished and you need to draw more cards, you cannot choose to not draw cards. When it's your turn, you need to draw cards. If you don't have any cards, you need to reshuffle your deck. Reshuffling will cost you a wound, or you can choose to seal 3 cards instead. So you'd reshuffle the deck, put it back, draw 3 cards, and put them face down nearby. So you can do that instead of taking the wound if you want. Other things to note, assault and contact actions are different to your normal actions. I'll show you this card again because it's got an assault action on there. The red action that I did before is actually an assault action. Default position with these actions is you can be 1 range for assault and contact actions. You don't need to be at 0 range. You don't need to be on the square. And some items and abilities might even allow you to be further away. For example, that would be 2 range. I don't have any ability there, but I could have done the assault from here. I did not need to be on this tile to do it. Finally, there is a limit to the number of miniatures and entities on a particular space. Now, you'll notice that a lot of the entities or the tokens, if you don't have the miniatures, are roughly the same size. You can fit 4 of those onto a space. If a 5th one would come along and try to push you or one of your other dreamers out, they can and will do that, unless there's only one of you on that space and the rest are all entities. If that's the case and there's already 4 in that spot, then the entity will just stop in an adjacent space. There's also large entities. They take up the whole space and they cannot be pushed. And I believe that if they spawn at a location that you're currently at, they will push you out of the way to an adjacent location, or other entities if there's smaller entities on that same location. You get to pick. All right, entity spawn spots. If there's multiple places for spawn, you can choose where you want the entity to spawn. However, if the turn location has one of the card symbols, the heart, diamond, club, or spade, then you have to prioritize that spawn point. If there's multiples, then you spread them out as evenly as you can, and just make sure that this one, if it's on the board, goes first and gets the most, if you can, as long as they're all spread out evenly. One more thing I will show with items, you'll notice it's got, like your influence cards, some influence up the top and then an ability down the bottom, which may or may not have a cost listed. At any time, the characters may discard, so put in your storage, one of your items to get the influence up the top, or at any time they can spend the required cost down here to get the bonus written at the bottom and then follow the instructions, usually discarding the card back into your storage spot or possibly into the market. The card will tell you, but that is another option for you to get extra influence. On the world map, you'll see there's some small squiggly lines, not the big ones. They're called shortcuts. At the bottom of each tile, it'll tell you the punishment for taking a shortcut. So in this case, you'd flip or seal a card. So flipping, take one of your progress cards and flip it over, or seal a card. We've already explained. If the card or if the arrow stretches across maps, like this one here would go over to a new world map that gets placed next to it, and you're going to take that shortcut, you would take the shortcut penalty that's on the bottom of where the card starts. So you would still take this penalty. I think that should just about do it. I think you should have enough understanding now to at least get into it, and once you start playing the game, you'll realize it is very straightforward and fairly simple to play and makes a lot of sense, and hopefully that's cleared a lot of things up for you all. Thanks very much for watching.